everyone. Happy Wednesday. Hope you're having a good day so far. My name's Callie and I'll be your host for this webinar. And I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to join us today as we discuss the 6 steps to data quality success. So in this session, Jonathan Agee will explore the risks and costs of common data testing approaches and discuss how the validator platform helps solve these problems. Additionally, we'll get to experience 3 sequences of validator demos from Matt Agee. If you enjoy this webinar, please feel free to check out any of our past webinar recordings. They're listed under the Insights tab on our website. So first, we have a few housekeeping things. This webinar is being recorded and will be sent out to everyone after the session, as well as uploaded to our Insights tab on the website. And we'll be answering questions at the end of this webinar, so please feel free to pose any questions in the chat. So with that being said, I'm now going to go ahead and introduce today's speakers. Jonathan Agee has spent the last 15 years in the data and analytics industry with roles spanning consultant, data architect, technical sales, and CTO. And he currently serves as president and CEO of Validator, which is an automated data quality and testing platform. He's gifted at seeing the big picture and understanding how diverse technology comes together to make a cohesive solution. Jonathan grew up in Oaxaca, Mexico, and graduated from Wheaton College, and he now calls Dallas, Texas home with his lovely wife and family. He's seriously passionate about all things tech, RC planes, his pandemic garden, and tacos al pastor. Matt Agee has spent the last 14 years crafting solutions in the data analytics space as a consultant, data architect, and data scientist, and currently serves as vice president of product innovation at Resultant. He has led teams delivering data warehouses, predictive analytics, dashboarding, and reporting suites with estimated combined ROI values of over 250 million. He's passionate about designing products with deep automation and transparency built throughout. Matt and his wife live in Boston with Kiko. They're Shiba Inu. Don't be mad at me if I mispronounce that, Matt. And he loves Wikipedia, math, history, and geography, and is always down to kick a soccer ball around. So with that, Jonathan, I'll go ahead and pass it off to you.
Thanks, Callie. Appreciate it. Just want to say a big thanks to our partner Resultant for inviting us to participate in this webinar. We're really excited to be here and share with you all about data quality and how a validator can help with testing automation. So let's go ahead and get started. So what I'd love to do, I'd love to hear from you all just while we get started here. If you can post in the chat, like where are you joining in from, just, city, state, whatever. I love to see the variety of where everyone's coming in from. So if you can get that going, that'd be awesome. So just a quick shout out there. All right, let's see. So I'm in Dallas, Matt's in Boston. Where are y'all in from? All right, let's get those chats going. There's Boston. All right. Well, you can keep doing that while I know this is maybe not your typical webinar, but we like to keep it interactive here. So that helps you get ready to write those questions as you have them throughout the webinar. So let's go ahead and get started. So from my experience in data and analytics over the last 15 years, as Callie mentioned, I've observed that, pretty much every single data project that we've dealt with has suffered because of some kind of lack of quality assurance. And this is just challenging throughout the whole industry. It's something that is endemic and is a real problem. And that's why we started Validator. That's the whole premise behind it. So what I want to do here is get going with what's going on with this? Why is this happening? What are symptoms you can be aware of that tell you this is a problem that you have in your projects? And then we're going to move through and start to understand how can we address this and how does Validator help specifically? So first off, let's talk about symptoms of lacking quality assurance. So I think one of the #1 symptoms that we see is just that constant pushback of your go live date, right? It's constantly getting delayed. And part of that is just the root cause there is underlying, you don't have clarity of what your expectations are, what your business users' expectations are, and how those are going to be met, and you're not showing them that they are met very clearly through quality assurance. Another one is just once you've got it out there, once you've got that product out there that folks are using, you've got slow adoption. And this happens because people don't trust what they're seeing in the data. They're really hesitant to really go for it and use it because they don't believe that it's got, good, clean answers to their problems. So another one is, this is tied in with your users as well, is it's difficult to get buy-in for new projects because people have been burned by not having successful projects in the past. So that's just a real challenge, something that's that happens a lot, and we see it over and over again. So let's keep going though. So this is maybe more on the obvious side of things. You get lots of bugs in production. And this can show up in many different ways, whether it's, someone complaining about a report that's not right. They're just, feeling like that data in that table that they're supposed to use, they find a column, it's empty. They find a column they're expecting to, have numbers to match their Excel report, doesn't match, whatever it is. People find those bugs all the time. And when you see that happening over and over again, you know that you need to really focus in on your quality assurance processes. Your users end up really frustrated when they're the ones who find those bugs. And, that just creates friction between data teams and business teams who are going to be using the data. And then, of course, if you're the responsible parties for running those ETL, ELT processes, moving data around, you're going to be frustrated when those processes start to fail and go bump in the middle of the night. And then you have to be the one to figure out what went wrong, how do we fix it, who do we tell, how do we escalate all of those challenges that can come up. So what I want to move towards is talking about 4 ways that our understanding of QA is defective. And I speak to this as an industry as a whole. We've raised up a whole generation of data engineers and data teams that don't really understand QA. They don't understand quality assurance. And at Validator, we're on a mission to change that. So number one way that it's misunderstood is that we have a misplaced view of what QA looks like for data. And so what do I mean by that? So whether your project is a waterfall, longer term, or maybe this is a cycle and these represent smaller pieces of delivery, we've often left out and forgotten QA as a part of the data project. And we think of QA for data as something that instead is really mostly to do with data quality, maybe in the source system, maybe it's cleaning up addresses, maybe it's, but it's really kind of misplaced. We're not thinking about quality assurance as an integral part of the overall project. And so what this leads to is really extended user acceptance testing, because basically we've put the entire onus of delivering this QA function on the users, and they get very frustrated. And I believe this is a significant contributor to what you've heard about for many years of the number of projects that just fail. So I think there's a high risk of failure when we do this. So another way that we don't kind of get QA is that we think of it in a very limited way, and we limit our approaches to how we can do QA when we don't understand what tools and capabilities are out there that we should use. And so particularly we see this where most people, when they are doing QA of some kind, it's almost all manual, which is really, really challenging. And data projects have very large scope. There's many objects involved. There's many processes to test, lots of stuff going on, but they're limiting QA to this testing function, and they're doing it all manually. And so what happens then is inevitably, the when you don't start quality assurance processes early in the project, your build phase ends up being delayed because you're just running into, data issues that you need to solve late in the project. Build gets extended, you get into QA, and then it's manual, it's expensive, it takes longer than you would hope for it to take. And that, because you didn't catch everything because it was manual, you were only able to test so much. Then you end up with, again, frustrated users who are doing user acceptance testing, which ends up just delaying that go live date that you're shooting for. So that's, going back to those symptoms. What are the things that we can see that are telling us that QA is maybe our problem? All right, so the third way that we don't understand and don't get QA is that it is undervalued. And I've seen this, whether it's data teams in-house at corporations or even consultants, it's very easy for folks to get distracted from the importance of QA. And I want to talk about this just a little bit because QA is hard. It's not always fun. And sometimes it feels like it's not required. Like you have to build the processes that create the data, move the data, transform the data. There's no way your project can be done if you haven't done those things. But you can get to done, right, in quotes, without doing QA sometimes. Now, you may not actually be producing what you should, but you can see that there's something there. Do I know if it's right or not? I don't know. But what ends up happening is that folks abandon their QA process. And this is how that happens. That same process we just talked about the build phase gets extended. You're pushing up against that deadline that you were expecting to go live. And QA, especially if you're doing it manually, it just feels like it's going to be so much work. And you're like, we've got to get something in front of our users. And so you end up skipping or abandoning that QA process. And then inevitably what happens is your users are the ones who end up finding those bugs, again, painful and frustrating for them, and potentially risky for careers and projects being complete failures. So all of that goes back to this issue of just not understanding the value of QA, and that if you actually did that QA, you could reduce that timeline and deliver on time. I think the final way in which we don't understand quality assurance is that, like I said, we've raised up an entire generation of data engineers and data teams that just lack the training on what does it look like to actually do quality assurance for data projects and data initiatives. And this is just, this is El Capitan. And I just think of, if someone told me, you need to go climb El Cap, I wouldn't really know where to start. Like, I don't know what gear I need. I don't know what route to take. I don't know whether one route's going to be one that leads to a dead end and an overhanging cliff that's impossible to climb, or whether another one's going to be the best route for a beginner. And so, I think that's where a lot of data teams are, is that they just don't know how to get started, and they don't have the skills on the team to really do quality assurance in the way that it needs to be done. And so that's where automation and sharing information about how to do that is something that we're all about, bringing those capabilities to data teams. So as we all like to think about ourselves as being problem solvers and everything, but intellectuals solve problems but geniuses prevent them. And so we want to be geniuses. We want to prevent those problems that we were just talking about your projects, going over, whether it's timeline or budget, having frustrated users. We want to deliver immense value through the data that we're delivering to our business users. So that's the overall goal. So let's then talk a little bit about how Validator fits into this. So first off, I just want to say, who is Validator for? Right? Validator is for data teams that are committed, and I mean really committed, to including quality as a core part of how they deliver their projects, how they deliver data to their organizations. And specifically, that they see and understand that this quality assurance process is a required part of being successful, of achieving success. So what does that look like? Well, we're changing how teams think about quality assurance for data. And particularly, we want to expand that vision of it. We don't want it to be limited. We want to make sure that we're addressing every part of the project correctly. So like I said, monitoring data quality in source systems, that's absolutely a part of it. But it's also not forgetting about testing when you're delivering data results, right? Delivering a project, right? That testing is critical. So when we think about quality assurance for data, it starts at the very beginning of the project, where we're understanding what is the quality of the data that we're going to be working with. We're doing discovery, we're understanding the metadata, we're profiling it so that we have a really clear picture of where we're going to run into data quality bumps that need to be taken care of during the design and the build phases of the project. And then from the very beginning, where we start to actually create the outputs of our project, whether that be a new data structure in a database, whether that be APIs, or whether that be reports or analytics or models, we want to be immediately beginning the testing portion of this quality assurance that is doing automated unit testing, automated regression testing, so that we can have absolute confidence that when we get to the end of the project, we are delivering exactly what our end users were expecting and asking for, and we can actually show to them that the requirements and the criteria that they have asked for have been vetted and that they are being met. And then as we move into the ongoing operation of our data infrastructure, we need to have continuous automated monitoring that's happening. And so with this expanded view of quality assurance for data projects, we don't want to abandon QA. We want it to be automatic and easy. We want it to be automated so that people don't feel like, well, this isn't worth it, but rather that they see the value that quality assurance brings to them. And so you can see the savings here, and I think they're obvious. And if you go out and you Google, like, why do data warehouse data projects fail? Almost every article that you read about that is going to talk about QA and testing being a key part of what you need to be doing. So you're going to save because you reduce the project timeline and cost. You're going to save because you have less bugs that make it to production. And we all know when a bug makes it to production, the cost of fixing them is very high. There's much change cost. There's a lot of cost in retesting and validating that it's fixed. And sometimes even those bugs can lead to much bigger problems, external problems, whether that be security risks or just reputational damage, those sorts of things. Of course, by delivering your data projects sooner, the business is able to react more quickly. So you can think about companies that were able to pivot very quickly with their data at the beginning of the pandemic were in a much better position to respond and change their operations when they had to. And that goes for whether a global crisis like a pandemic or just competition that's driving your, changes in your industry. And ultimately, that's the final one, is being able to operate your business better, make better business decisions, and deliver better value to your customers, your clients. So This is the kind of value that our customers are seeing, and bringing them efficiency to be able to deliver the results that they need to their business. So in the Texas Mutual quote here, you can see that Validator enabled their team to test 2,300 tables through automated scripts in a week. And they've gone, this number is actually a little bit out of date. They've gone over 2 years with 0 data issues reported in production, because they've been continuously testing in dev, in QA, and ultimately monitoring in production. So they have really been excited about those results, and many people have actually gotten promotions because of that. So we're very proud of that. And then just to illustrate a little bit about, how does this work out, right? At one of the Fortune 500 food and beverage customers of ours, an analyst found an issue in one of their columns in Snowflake. And by creating a template to take a look and find that particular issue, they were able to run that same test against all 20,000 of the columns in their database. They found issues that had been under the covers, bugs that had gotten deployed to production. And now they don't have to worry about that ever again, because that test is going to automatically test every single new column that comes out there for that issue. All right, so let's get into how do we accomplish this. We've talked about the big picture. We've talked about the problems of not understanding QA, quality assurance, and how we fall into these traps. Now let's talk about how do we actually implement some changes here. So first one is going to just take us back to the beginning, and we're going to say you've got to be able to document your test plan. That's your first thing. Second, we need to start off from the beginning with automation in mind. There's too much to do in testing your data to do it manually. And so we need to create templates that are going to run our processes. Thirdly, we've got to capture requirements in the form of metadata so that they can drive our quality assurance processes, whether that's our monitoring processes, whether that's our testing, our unit testing, our regression testing, et cetera. And then, of course, we got to generate and execute those tests efficiently. We've got to capture and centralize the results. And I talked about this a little bit before. It's really, really critical that in order to show our business users, our business customers, that the data that they are using is trustworthy, we got to show them the testing that we've done and be able to prove that the requirements are being met. And then we've got to, of course, report and notify users based on that. All right, so just to kind of speak to what does a test plan look like, right? We've got to think about what are the objectives of our tests? What is the scope? How are we going to do this? What are the risks that we're preventing against? And what are the risks of our project, right, to our project? We got to know who's going to do what, right? And Validator is going to help you by taking a lot of the heavy lifting of this and being able to accelerate and do that for you. Ultimately, what is your deliverables and schedule? This is standard stuff. This is not really changing a whole lot other than plugging in automation into the mix to give you more confidence about being able to execute on this. This is where things start to diverge from what maybe your traditional manual test plans might look like. And so with Validator, what we look for always is repeatable processes. What is, if we're building a data warehouse and you think about, dimensions and facts, or we're migrating data and we're moving our data warehouse or our data lake from an on-prem system to the cloud. Many people are doing this, right? Each of those processes we can break down and say, what is common? Well, if we're doing a migration, how do we map the data from where it was to where it's going to be and make sure that we've moved all the data, that we've moved all the columns, that things match, and that when we start running reports off our new environment, they're going to be accurate? Well, we can create a template to do that comparison. And so we set up our templates for each kind of pattern that we think about as we build our test plan. In step 3, as we talked about, capturing requirements in the form of metadata. In Validator, you're going to hear us talk about our data quality catalog. And in our data quality catalog, we bring together in the form of metadata documentation about our data, things that tell us that set what are our expectations for this data, what is the format supposed to be, where is it coming from and where is it going, what are the relationships that we have set up, what are particular roles for columns, maybe this is a surrogate key or a natural key, or maybe this is a last update date or something like that. All of that captured metadata allows us to test automatically. So that's very important to be able to automate. And then Validator, of course, generates those test cases for us from our templates and allows us to then run them at scale in parallel without someone having to actually run queries in multiple systems and compare data. Validator just does all of that for us and just alerts us when there's particular issues that we need to take a look at, where we may have not matching data or data that doesn't meet our criteria. Finally, Validator provides us the centralized repository just out of the box. You don't have to build this. You don't have to spend time, kind of creating the machine to do your testing. It all comes out of the box for you. It's repeatable. It's auditable. You could run a report a year down the road and show, here's all the tests we ran. Here's exactly the results that we got at the time when we ran those. And then you want to have those proactive notifications and reports that are going to come to you when something goes bump in the night, when something is detected, so that you can very quickly respond to that and understand, is this something that we need to notify our end users about? Don't know how many times I've seen this, that when you tell an end user, tell your user base, hey, there's something wrong with this report, but we're fixing it, their reaction is so much different than if they find it and they tell me that there's something wrong with the report. If they tell me, they're super frustrated about it. But if I reach out and tell them, they say, okay, great, thanks for letting me know. And you've just built trust instead of losing trust. All right. So we're coming up close to our demo here, but I wanna say this. We're gonna share with each of you our data testing toolkit. And our data testing toolkit is basically a guide. We talk about these 6 principles that we just went through here, but also it's a resource to give you an idea of what are the top 5 categories of tests that you should be implementing in your environment and how can you do that. So it's available at this link right here, but we'll also be sharing this out with you, everyone who attended the webinar today. So that's our thank you to you. And so just a little bit before we jump into the demo, I just want to give an overview of the platform. What is Validator and how does it work behind the scenes? So Validator connects to all of your data. It doesn't matter where it is, what kind of data it is, we can connect to pretty much anything there. We first ingest metadata, the descriptive structure of that data, into our data quality catalog. And that data quality catalog is where we enrich that with additional documentation about that data so that we can then use that to drive those quality assurance processes, whether it's how we want to monitor it, whether it's what and how we want to test it, all of those sorts of things. The user interfaces, of course, are how folks interact with this. So Validator is a web application where there's nothing to install on your computer. It's either in your environment or it's in the cloud, but you access it via a web browser. And Validator then connects to your data behind the scenes, and the automation engine runs all those processes, whether it's generating thousands and thousands of tests, whether it's executing those tests, pulling data, comparing data, validating it, storing the results. All of those processes happen behind the scenes and on a schedule if you want them to. And then one of the things that we're most excited about is our marketplace and our community that we're building. So our marketplace is where we, Validator, are curating how are people able to test and accelerate their processes with templates and standards and examples that they can get started more quickly? Testing is a really interesting problem in that everyone's environment is a little bit different. Every scenario is a little bit different, but we want to set you up for success by giving you out of the box ideas and templates to get started quickly. So that's what we're doing with the marketplace. So with that, that gives you a little bit of an overview of Validator. You're going to see it in action here in a moment. So let me just kind of share what is our demo going to look like. So we're going to run through 3 scenarios, as Callie said. So the first scenario that Matt's going to show us a demo of is for a cloud migration. So imagine you're migrating from an on-prem, maybe a SQL Server or an Oracle, something along those lines, data warehouse, and you're migrating to, let's say, Snowflake in the cloud, right? It could be any number of databases. We'll just kind of think of that as our example. And you're moving all that data over, and you want to verify, did all of it come over correctly? Is the are all the tables completely filled out? Are the columns mapped correctly so that they're all there? Ultimately, the question is, are the reports going to run right like they should when we get to that point in the project? But that's scenario 1. We're going to come back and we're going to look at, after that, scenario 2 is going to be looking more at that monitoring process and how your end users, your business users, can actually get involved in defining the parameters for how the data should be monitored and what criteria we should specify for it by updating and setting values in our data quality catalog. And then finally, scenario 3 is going to be, how do we test Tableau dashboards? So, you don't want to have that question in the morning. My dashboard doesn't look right this morning. What's wrong with it, right? And inevitably, something went wrong in the database, something went wrong in the connection. There was some change that happened that no one foresaw how it was going to impact the report. So how do we test that and verify that, and some other things of how we can test our Tableau dashboards as well. So with that, I'm going to stop my share and we're going to hand it over to Matt for the demo. I do want to go ahead and throw this out there. I heard if you have a question, it may be best if you put that in the Q&A box instead of in the chat. I'm not sure if the chat is working for everyone.
Okay, thank you guys all for joining, and excited to kind of walk you through some examples here, some scenarios that we've been running into, and show you how easy it is to get started with Validator and how powerful Validator can be once you are up and running. So here in Validator, you should be seeing that I have a very, very simple setup going right now where I have created 2 data sources. One is a data source that's connecting to an on-premise SQL Server. And as you can see, this has a list of tables. All I did was set up this data source and do the automated metadata ingestion that comes shipped out of the box with Validator. That's all that I did for this data source. Similarly, my ETL developers have been working on migrating a bunch of this logic up into Snowflake, and so they have now given me access to our Snowflake equivalent, which if I go ahead and open it up, you will see we have somewhat equivalent data set up there in Snowflake. You will notice there are some differences here. So things like in Snowflake, we have underscores between table names, whereas in SQL Server, there it is using camel case and things. So there are some differences. There's some complexity there. It's not a perfect match, but we want to go through the process of saying, hey, is the data and the structure and maybe some of the rules that have been put in place working as we would expect them to in our new environment? So what's great about Validator is that we can get started with this really quickly. And I'm going to show you how we do that by using something that we have published on our marketplace, which is our migration test pack for SQL Server to Snowflake. So if you come to our marketplace right here, you'll see we have a bunch of different content listed out here and published that you can download to get started with very quickly. And I'm going to go ahead and open this one up, and you will see that what we're getting is some metadata tests, some profile tests, some aggregate tests, and some full table comparison tests, all for checking that something has, a migration from SQL Server to Snowflake is working as expected. So we're going to go ahead and get and say download, and we'll see that we now have an XML file that was downloaded. If I come over here to my projects, you'll see I have a project set up for cloud migration testing. Right now it does not have any tests in it, does not have any jobs in it. It's totally empty. So I'm just going to go ahead and import, select a file, and then as you can see, I downloaded this migration test pack, and I will just open this one up. And here, this is going to ask us some questions about how we want to import this. So first of all, we have to map our data sources. The first one here should be our Snowflake migrated data source. Second one needs to be our SQL Server data source, and so those are mapping over. Secondly, it's asking us, where do we want to put in these example tests and example jobs? And so we're just going to put them in the root folder. We're going to click on tests, click on jobs. We're going to hit review changes. And as we go through here, we'll see, hey, it's going to create a bunch of new tests for us. Nothing was there before, so this is very easy. We just hit import. And we are off and running. And so if you look in our tests area, you will see that we have some standard tests, which are individual tests that will check things like, is the list of schemas correct? Is the list of tables correct? And then we have some template tests that are going to check that the columns match per table, or that the data types match per table. And that'll create a separate test for each of our tables, and we'll run through each one of them individually. I'm going to go ahead and just kick off, if I come down here to my job, I'm going to go ahead and kick off a job that runs all of those metadata tests. And we're going to see how this goes as it runs through. But just while we're running that in the background, I'm going to speak a little bit about some of these other test types. So when we talk about profiling, that's more about actually getting into the values that exist in that data, not just the metadata, but the values. And so things like, how many rows are there? What's the distinct counts? Are they null or are they not null per column? And so the row count is at a table level, but the distinct count and the null count would be at the column level. And so as we go ahead and run those are going to be showing us details about the actual values in the table, not just the structure of the table. But coming back here to our metadata tests, we'll see, if I go ahead and pull up our schema list comparison, that if I come to my history, I can see that this successfully passed. And just one second, I want to clear that filter, and we'll see that the 5 schemas match between the 2 different systems. Looking good. If we pull up instead, come over to our results area and pull up our run metadata tests. Nope, sorry. One sec. Pull up our table list comparison results. We will see that most of our tables were passing, but our person.password table, while it exists on the control side, is not missing on the test side, and therefore that means it's not in Snowflake. We did not successfully move over our password table from SQL Server to Snowflake. Now, maybe that's something that we want to, say that's acceptable or not, but at least we now know the password table and anything that would depend on the password table is not going to be working on the other side. So again, this is, simple example. As we go through here, let's just go back twice. You'll see that we can dive down into even deeper information. For example, we can check which ones match all of their columns. And if we go ahead and pull up something like our employee table, we will see that the organization node column failed to come through from from SQL Server up into Snowflake. So for some reason, the mapping was failing on this particular column, and we're now aware of that. And anything downstream from that column could be impacted. So again, all of these details can be seen as we just automatically run this, and we can check things like whether the columns are in the right order, what the data types are like, and whether the data types match. So I'll just show one more flavor of that. For example, with our data types, again, if I come down here maybe to my document table, you will see that the document and the document node, the data types are not matching. As we go through this, if I go ahead and run some of these other sets of tests, I'll go ahead and run the profile tests. And while I'm waiting for it, I will run my aggregate tests. I will come back and look at those profile results as they run here. As you can see, it's still running. If I go ahead and open up this step, I can then see which ones have passed and which failed. When we look at row counts, it looks like 53 row count tests ran, and they all passed. So the row counts are looking good for all 53 tables in which we did a row count check. And if I go ahead and pull up one of these, for example, maybe my employee pay history, I can see the result 316 rows to 316 rows, and I can see that automatically we ran a check of the profile value of record count against the profile count of record count from the two systems. Finally, if I go ahead and pull up one of these examples where we've run a test that's more kind of an aggregate test, we can do something where we would group every single table by every single ID column and get a count for each ID value. So that's what this template here is going to be doing, going through and checking all aspects of each table. And if we look at the history here, go ahead and pull these back up, we'll see that for the human resources employee department history table, as grouped by department ID, we're getting 16 rows back on each side for the 16 IDs. And for each one of those IDs, we're getting the same test value, same control value. So we can be very confident here that our department ID column has flowed through with the right number of rows for each value between the two systems. And we can get more and more detailed as we go. This is just an example of how much kind of comes out of the box with Validator.
All right, thanks, Matt, for that demo for the cloud migration. So what you saw there is really just how easy it is to get started with Validator, especially in a scenario where you've got some examples. And this particular download from the marketplace was SQL Server to Snowflake, and that's exactly what we've got. But of course, almost all of those tests and SQL that you're using, it could work for just about any database, because everything is using pretty much ANSI SQL capabilities. So that could easily be extended to be for Oracle to Snowflake, etc. So very, very powerful capabilities there. All right, so we're going back to our second scenario, and that is catalog-driven monitoring. So again, in this one, we're going to look at how the whole team, not just the QA engineers or maybe even just the data engineers can influence how do we test, but the whole team can get involved through our catalog, our data quality catalog, and drive those testing and monitoring scenarios.
Yep, thanks, Jonathan. And so again, here, while on the other one, we were kind of using pre-built tests that would be brought in when we imported them in, and then just automatically ran against a whole database. Here, we're going to drive more of the decision-making by updating the documentation. And so that documentation is in our Explorer area. And if we go ahead and open up this same migrated Snowflake database, we can see that we have our list of schemas. Again, you might recognize those. But when we come into a particular schema, we can say, hey, I want to turn on data quality monitoring. And in this case, I said I only want to do it for specific tables and columns for my human resources schema. But maybe if I check my person schema, I'll say that I want to do all the table level tests and set that to 10%. And so what we're looking for is data quality change, or monitoring all of our tables for changes of 10% or more in their distinct counts or their counts and all sorts of things like that, just so that we can be, make sure that things are not completely being lost or dropping off the, tables being truncated, all sorts of things like that we will be monitoring for. And so what's great about this is that we have pre-built into the tool what is called our validator DQM quick start. And so that quick start looks very similar in that it has a set of tests that can be run for a particular database. And these will, are shipped directly with the product and are very, very easy to get started with. And some of them are this comprehensive monitoring at the column level or the table level. Other ones are things like field formatting, checking that emails are actually emails, checking that phone numbers are actually phone numbers, so forth, or things like column or table level expectations, checking that all strings of a particular length or all strings in a column are between X and Y in length, or that the distinct count of a column should be between X and Y. And so these are the types of expectations that we can set, and we do that by updating the documentation. So I'm going to go ahead and show you. If I come over here to my person table, look at my columns, we will see that we have, profile information coming up here, but I want to come in and say that my first name should be between 2 characters and 30 characters long. So I do that by coming in and setting and tagging these expectations. So right now that has already been tagged for me for my first name, but if I come to my middle name column, I don't have an expectation. So I'm going to go ahead and hit edit, come here and say value length should be between X and Y, and maybe say that my middle names can be between 0 and 10 characters long. Go ahead and hit save. We know some people don't have middle names, so that's acceptable. But what that means is now any of our end users could have documented this expectation, right? That our middle name should have a particular range of lengths. When we come over here to our test and we materialize these child tests, we will now see 3 child tests, one checking our middle name, one checking our last name, and one checking our first name. And each one is checking for a different range, a different length that those values can be. So I can run all of these and immediately see whether or not my columns are matching that expectation. So if I pull up my middle name column, we will see that 2 individuals here had longer middle names out of the 71 total distinct middle names that we had. So those are outside of the range, and maybe for a variety of reasons that's acceptable or not acceptable, but that's what the expectation was set as. So this is an example of how end users can come in and document details about their data, and then that will automatically turn into tests being run, and then those tests showing up as passes or failures for that column. So again, if we come back here to the person level, we will see that those tests were created, and this will update and say that they had failures.
Thanks, Matt. So that was awesome to see how the integration of the data catalog in our data quality catalog can drive those quality assurance processes. And that just means you've got this integrated end-to-end process that gets everyone involved and seeing that their expectations for the data are actually being met, and knowing and having kind of that comfort that it's being monitored for them. All right, so we're going to finish up with our last scenario, and that is getting into how can you test things beyond everything we've shown you so far is really looking more at like a database migration or something like that, testing the data in your database. But your data projects really expand much more beyond that. And so every data project pretty much has, you know, some way that data is getting in front of users. Maybe it's a report, maybe it's Tableau or Power BI or something like that. And so we're going to show you in this last demo how you can monitor and test those some Tableau dashboards to ensure that, you know, you don't wake up to that question in the morning of, hey, my dashboard looks funny, something's missing, what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. And so for this one, I'm going to show you a quick Tableau dashboard that, you know, is very, very simple. But this is a sales dashboard helping, you know, territory managers understand, you know, how many sales they have, you know, what their order quantity and their line total is by category and over time. And as you'll see, this is set up specifically to be, you know, for a single territory at a time. And so, you know, maybe the territory manager for Canada would come in here and look at Canada's details, and they would, you know, see those. And so one of the things, though, that we wanted to test was we want to check, hey, does this data that's showing on the dashboard actually match to what's in Snowflake or in the data warehouse? And are there any discrepancies getting from what's been validated in our data warehouse to the actual end user? And so if you come here to our projects, we'll show you some Tableau testing examples. And if I pull up this territory overview dashboard for single territory, you'll see that we're running some SQL statements against Snowflake. And then on the other side, we can run some Python against the Tableau server API. And so this is pulling data directly from the Tableau server. This is pulling data directly from the Snowflake database. And we're checking that Tableau view is working correctly. So if I go ahead and hit run, we will get a result back here. And in that result, we will see the order quantity from Tableau, which is the test value, and we will see the order quantity from Snowflake grouped by our category. So again, pulling this value directly off of the sheet, not going through the database, but pulling it from here, and we're testing that they would match. So that's great, that's all good, but you know, there's lots of times where we would potentially want not just to see it for, you know, the one filtered criteria that we had here, which was the territory of France. Instead, we might want to loop through on the dashboard and change the filter each time, and loop through in Snowflake and change the where clause each time. And so for that, we have an example where we're going to, you know, templatize that query and check that it matches for each territory, and then also check that it matches for both the sales order total and the quantity. And so if you look here, these are templatized queries that are being adjusted as we go through. Similar down here, the Python is being templatized to adjust those things. And what's great about this is if I come here to see what's driving this metadata, you can see the list that we're going to loop through. So we have 10 line totals for the 10 territories. We have 10 order quantity checks for the 10 territories. So 20 in total. If I go ahead and look at our history, and we can see where this ran in the past, it's passing for each of our different locations, territories, except for our central territory. And if I go ahead and pull up central here, we'll see that a bunch of our categories are totally off. They're saying on the dashboard 950, or saying in Snowflake 952 to the dashboard 734. What's going on? Something is off in the central area. And so you might think, okay, is this in Snowflake? Well, no, it's somewhere between Snowflake and the dashboard. So if I go ahead and open up that dashboard and filter, open up this view, I'll notice, hey, I actually have an account number filter on here. What's going on there? Oh, I'm filtering out one outlier account. Somebody was doing an analysis when they were building this, and they accidentally filtered out this one account. And that is now being reflected in the final dashboard, though we may or may not, it's not being reflected, or it's not representative of everything that's in Snowflake, all of the data that's been validated there. And so this picked up on that by looking at, pulling the, picked up on this hidden filter that you wouldn't have even seen if you were at the, looking at the dashboard as a whole, but the data was wrong, and it was an outlier client that was our biggest client. Thus, in the East, or in that one territory, it was throwing everything off. So that's an example of Tableau or Validator being able to iterate through one object in Tableau. We also have very cool examples where we can iterate through a bunch of different objects, a bunch of different sheets or things like that in a Tableau workbook, and check for each one that they are staying consistent and monitoring them over time. So that's another flavor here. This is a Tableau check that the unique counts for every column have stayed the same, or within 10% or 5% over the last 10 days. And again, it's a Python query in comparison to the results of that same Python query over the past 7 days. And if I go ahead and look at the history of this, we'll see that it's working for multiple ones of our sheets, but for our flight delays, it is saying that accidentally the carrier name column had gotten removed in the latest run. And so therefore it's not showing up. Therefore, that is failing our test of are all of the columns staying the same. So these are some of the types of things where you can templatize in Validator checks against a lot of objects or against one specific object, looping through different criteria or scenarios.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay.
That's really awesome. So we're really excited about this. What Matt just showed with the ability to integrate natively with Tableau is something that also is something that we can do with Power BI. But really, when you think about what you can do with Python, this really opens up the capabilities to integrate with just about any platform out there. So we're really excited about that capability. As you can see, we ship with a lot of things out of the box, and there's a lot of options in the marketplace to get you started. So we want you to be able to move quickly there. But what Validator doesn't completely do for you is that creative side of testing, right? How do you think about what could go wrong, and how could I detect that went wrong? And so we're going to give you examples. We're going to get you thinking about that, but it still does take some of that thought process. But what we do is this was one of the questions that had been posed, is how do we help you get started? So we have training that we suggest for our clients on how to use Validator, but then we also have some quick start packages that we suggest to do some of that testing automation strategy work and get your team up to speed with this new mindset, this new way of thinking. So we would always recommend that. Then we did have another question. So right now is a good time for questions. We're moving into Q&A. We had another question, I think, that popped up in how do we notify people? How does that work? And so there's a little bell icon that you can see on Matt's screen up there. You can set up notifications, you can set up reports and subscriptions, basically to alert you about any particular scenario that you're interested in, and make sure that the right people get that notification and can follow up and resolve any of those issues. So yeah, those are really good questions. I'd love to hear if anyone else has questions. But if not, this has been really a great session. We appreciate everyone who's attended. So yeah, thank you so much. And Callie, I'll turn it over back to you in case there's other questions or anything that pops up.
Yeah, so there is another question, and it's, how is Validator deployed? Is it a SaaS solution or is it something that you can install?
Yeah, great question. So thanks to for that question. What we've got, and you'll see this if you go out to our website, actually, validator.com, we have two flavors. So we have a SaaS version that if you're in the cloud and your data is out there and accessible to, interact with, we recommend our cloud version. That's something that we host and manage for you. It also has an agent that can connect into on-prem data to allow you to test with that. But we also have, for, some institutions are very kind of sensitive about where their data is and where it can leave. So we do have a server edition that can be deployed inside of your environment if that's an important requirement for your setup.
And they have the exact same look and feel and capabilities, both the server and the cloud version. It's just about where they're hosted and who's hosting them, where what firewalls they're behind, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. And then I see that you answered a question in the chat from Dave. It was, how does Validator help with services?
Yep.
And how can you begin a partnership? Do you want to go ahead and speak more about that and answer it live?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So like I said in my typed out answer there, services is a really important part of getting up and going with something as new and different as kind of this paradigm of quality assurance and testing automation. And so first and foremost, we always recommend to our clients that they need to be trained on how does Validator work and how can they take advantage of those features. So that's something that we offer. We also have some quick start packages that are really designed around kind of the strategy side of things, of how do you think about this differently. But we really love to partner with our key partners like Resultant to deliver any kind of services work. If you're looking for additional resources, folks who have implemented this kind of thing before, that's where we go to our consulting partners, implementation partners. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, thank you guys both for such a great presentation, and watching those demos was just awesome and so interesting. And like you said, we appreciate your partnership so much, and it's been a great journey.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the opportunity. We really appreciate it. And thanks to all who attended.
All right. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Have a good one. Bye.